Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and PewdiePie recently did a video where he was, frankly, absolutely incensed by the crazy levels of value when it came to some of the more fine art pieces. I'm in a unique position here because I've worked in multiple art museums for at least 5 years now. Important part is worked past tense. I don't work there anymore, so I can actually say some of the parts that most people still in the industry cannot say if they want to still be in the industry. I'm not, so I can actually talk about a lot of this. I just thought, hey, you know what? This is really cool. I could jump in and show you exactly why these things are worth so much. Some of them for very steady, very appreciable reasons. Others for the reasons that you don't talk about unless you are no longer working in that capacity, which I can because I'm not. So I can say things a few years ago I was not allowed to say, and I'm looking forward to that. So we're just going to jump right in and see how fast this video gets me demonetized because I swear a lot. That's the thing I do. You guys know the deal. Link below. There's a video link. Hit it up. It's PewdiePie though, so I'm assuming you've probably seen it. If you haven't, click it. It's actually rather good. Let's get started.
I want to test this on art. If I can tell expensive art from cheap art, right? Which of these color fields is more expensive?
Okay, we're starting off infuriating territory.
6.
Okay.
That's not a pretentious title at all.
Personally, I have a
Field
preference
by
here, Cherry Field, but
Lisa Charney. I'm gonna go with Barney.
we all know exactly which one's
43 bucks.
43.8 million. As you can see, it's not much fancier,
God, dude.
but wait for a second.
Jesus Christ, that is insane.
Yes, it is. That is a very insane price. The reason, though, is not actually so much the art itself. It's based on one of the 4 markers art is standardly valued on. The first one that would apply in this situation is not actually the value of the art itself, but the value of the artist who made it. In this case, the artist who did it would have had a significant reputation within the art community that was buying it, so they would know, okay, he made it, it's going to be good. Is that a good way to value art in an objective sense for someone who just enjoys art? Art is subjective, so I can't say no, but personally, no. That's dumb, which I know for a fact I'm going to contradict later, but I'm going to pretend I'm not right now. What that price reflects is 2 things. One, the artist was well known. He's not making anymore. So when you look at the price, it's a piece of art history, not so much an art piece itself. It's a very small distinction, but whenever you get to that point, you're not buying the art because you like the art. A lot of people did that before, which is why you want it now, because other people value it. It's a weird way to look at it, but the value of other people having liked things in the past does change how people value anything done by the artist in the present. And that is exactly what's happening here. Add the fact in that that actual piece is huge, so it's very hard to move, it's very hard to ship, it's very hard to replicate, because if you make a very good fake of that, at that point, you're putting so much effort into it, you might as well just make a couple alterations and call it your own, because it would be completely worth it.
Oh, it's huge.
See?
Okay.
Yeah.
But still.
This is literally art bait. I'll get more
Ooh.
into that later.
It looks better small.
Yep. Oh, it was sold recently.
43 million.
Looks like the artist, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but that's a style that's more
get
contemporary within the last 100 years.
here. Stop. Dude, that looks like you put masking tape in the middle. I bet that's what they did. Oh, no.
That is actually a technique. Like, I'm not even going to lie, that is legitimately a technique. Whether it was used here or not, I don't know. But it's actually kind of cool when it's done well. It has a really neat layered effect, especially when you do spray paint. It's almost like a faux graffiti effect, but on huge canvases. It's been done a few times, and honestly, even though he's kind of ridiculing it right now, when it's done well, it's actually a very cool technique. When it's done well.
Oh, no.
That last part is very important.
Oh, God. I mean, art is subjective, Felix, and...
Yeah, but also,
times what
subjectively,
you like,
it looks
other people
stupid.
Don't like, but
I don't like it. It's just too blue.
This sucks, dude. This
It's very
fucking
70s.
Sucks. This sucks so bad.
It's very utilitarian
This is so
70s.
bad, dude.
Like,
What
you
the
walk
fuck?
into any hotel in the 70s.
It's not even a good blue.
It looks like
It's not
that.
even a good blue. I hate it. I hate it. I hate you. All right, a potato. That's funny. Or Slow Down by Rose Piper.
No, this one. This is infuriating.
I don't know.
I don't like this one. I really don't like this one. Okay, so I mentioned art bait earlier. This is an example of it. Although it's not the most infuriating. This right here, potato. From an objective sense, it's the equivalent of pictures of flowers. Here's a common thing, but when we focus on it, it becomes artistic. The only people who believe that are people who are so ingrained into the old style of thinking that they actually know that thought process. They actually know that the idea of revitalizing things as high art that are contemporary and normal is actually a concept of painting that was brought up not in the Impressionist phase. It was actually prior to that, but it's been a very long-running form of art. So it's more art for art's sake that is mostly appreciated by artists and art collectors who are more in tune with artists. For any normal person out there who isn't in the art scene, who isn't in this hobby as a dedicated force, it's a freaking potato in a black background. Who cares? It's incredibly detailed. I don't even know if that's a picture or a painting. And that right there is impressive. But it's boring as hell. But when you're following the tradition of art, elevating the mundane, and if it looks like I'm overacting, and that's exactly intentional, it's because that's a very traditional form of setting up a piece. It's a composition material. So when you see this, it's not so much the picture that they're evaluating at. It's artists thinking, oh, wow, he's doing it with something even more mundane than normal. It's not a flower pot. It's not a vase. It's not a block of cheese. Also, yes, there is a painting that's literally just a block of cheese. And it is glorious, but that's because I'm biased because it's cheese. And this is what we're looking at right here. This isn't so much art for art's sake. It's art for basically shout out to all the bros who get art lore. It's literally a shout out to art lore. That's all it is. The fact that the artist is probably well known in art circles, so it's hard to get his work for the people who want it, so it adds scarcity, would also increase the price. So what we're about to see is reflective of that.
Oh,
that said,
$1 million. $1 million.
Yeah.
You know, people rip into NFTs, right?
Yeah.
What the fuck is this?
They
then?
do.
The fuck is this?
Exactly, right? Oh, that's a really good picture of it. He mentions NFTs, and I don't think he realizes that that is a very good comparison, because an NFT is getting a point in time where it can't be replicated. That's the thought behind it. It's bullshit because you can. In the same way you can replicate art, you can get a print of it, but the print is not worth the original's price sometimes. I'll get to that part later. Here, though, it's that same thing. It's literally art for art's sake, where the people who buy NFTs like that one thing. So they really want that one thing. They want a piece of that one thing. Here, like I said, it's art for art's sake, but specifically art for the sake of artists' sake, because the people who get it, who know what it's referencing to and know the background of how you set up that composition, are the people who like it. The important part here is that it's only $1 million, which is not a phrase I like saying, because it is $1 million. But as far as overvalued art goes, that's on the cheap end. These words pain me.
It's a nice potato, I guess. It's very detailed.
It is.
How much did this painting?
Ooh, now this one is
Salvador
actually
Mundi
fun.
By Leonardo da Vinci. Well, I know,
Yep.
everyone knows Leonardo da Vinci.
Remember what he just said? That's important.
And maybe originally it was
Nope.
sold for this price or something.
Oh, God, no.
No, it was 450 million. Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Now, I want to go back just to show that picture. Here we go. Now, the important part here isn't so much the actual piece of art. This is early Renaissance period. And if anyone might have heard of, PewdiePie, for example, knew Leonardo da Vinci. But I'm also sure a lot of people who don't know art have heard of Leonardo da Vinci. He's passively famous for inventions, art, painting, sculpture, having a working blueprint of a helicopter, which wouldn't work well, but was close enough to what we actually use now that people are still kind of amazed by it. Yeah, he even wrote up sketches for submarines. The guy was insanely brilliant. But more importantly, you're not looking at the value here of art, because the picture itself is just standard religious art that was heavily pushed out during this time period, because most other art was looked down on and or literally destroyed. What you're looking at here is two things. One being the name of the artist, like the previous ones. This is Leonardo da Vinci, but it's so much more than that, because It's not just famous in art circles. This is famous in general history circles. Anyone who knows anything about Italian history has probably heard something about Leonardo da Vinci. So just having something from him is valuable. The fact that it looks nice makes it valuable. The fact that he actually pulled off a really cool technique back here to obstruct the view, to alter the light, to show that there's an object, but not actually show the object itself because it's transparent, is something that a lot of artists, especially back then and now and ever, struggle with. Light differential effects and diffusion is not an easy technique to get. When you do it, though, it looks great. It's actually really damn cool. I like it more than the rest of this. And yes, it's the generic, okay, we're going to do the Jesus pose. They even have the Jesus style, and it's basically someone who probably paid for their own art of themselves. I wouldn't be surprised. That's how artists make money, self-portraits. It's a very common art style. That said, also it could just be another Jesus picture. I don't know. They usually do both. And then there's also the people who do pictures of Jesus, but then they ask the artist to subtly make it more like them because it suits their ego. Yeah, that's the thing that happened. So right now, what we're looking at is mostly just, here's history. Not just because it's art, it looks reasonably good. It's also really old, so it's antique. But this plays into a few different aspects. In fact, it hits all of the 4 gradations when it comes to the value of art. The first being the artist, which I've talked about. The second being it's old. That usually falls more in the artist because it kind of factors into that. After that, though, is the quality of the art itself. It's really nice. Also kind of factoring in the age because it survived pretty well. Not entirely there, but it usually factors in. Age plays part in with the artist, especially after he's dead, which would happen with age. And the fact that it survives as long, so it also factored in and plays well. But then there's the 2 other aspects. Who sold it and who owned it? Now, I don't know who sold it. It might have been Da Vinci. It might have gone to someone directly. It might have gone to a church. I don't know. So I can't say anything about that. But what I can say is who owned it is very important. Now, considering the time frame when Da Vinci was painting and the people in charge of the church in Rome at the time, there's a very good chance this was owned, at least in part, by the Medici family, who were essentially Italian mobsters, except they were legitimately the government, the religion, and also the priests, the cops, the criminals, and the people catching the criminals. They were literally in charge of everything. They were the most powerful family in that entire section of the world. And they commissioned a lot of art, partially because it made people think better of them, partially because ego stroking. Would they have commissioned this? No. But it's a guarantee someone would have owned this at some point who was Medici. The reason that's important is because part of the valuation of art is who has owned it since its creation. If anyone in the Medici family has owned it, it makes it part of their family story. It makes it part of their history, which then increases the value of the painting itself. So this looks good, value. It's made by Leonardo da Vinci, value. It's most likely guaranteed to have been owned by historically relevant people who history has made a point to remember for good and oftentimes batshit insane reasons. I know enough about their history to realize fuck those guys. That they were monstrous. And that's when they were being nice. So that is 3 massive reasons of value. Also, it's really old, which plays into all of them. The third one also being more people can own it, so more people will have touched it. This, though, is 3 great examples of this. Now, again, I don't know who was selling the piece, so I can't say, but it could very well have been owned by a very important seller. I'll get more into that later, though. So right now, it's 3 great reasons of value. So the price will be huge here. But those are the 3 of the 4 big ones you get when you have the traditional art valuation. We're going to get into a few, though, that don't fall into that category. And while this one, I'm actually really okay with it being so high because it has the traditional valuation process, the later ones, yeah, it gets infuriating really fast. Just no.
No, everyone knows Leonardo da Vinci. I feel like this is a trick question, and maybe originally it was sold for this price or soming. No, it was
450.3 million.
Right.
And honestly, if they sold it now, it'd probably be more.
Bro, $500 million.
Yeah.
$500 million. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci. I've never seen that artwork. Like, I've seen a ton of Leonardo da Vinci. I ain't seen. It's kind of cool though.
Not
He's
the most
holding,
famous,
like, a
but
thing, and he's doing like a Korean love sign, right?
it's also
kind of sick. Looks like Jesus.
frankly
too.
used because it's just
Can you
easier to
guess
hold your hands
how
like that.
much? Yeah, this is awful. This is there's bad art. I don't like
yeah, I
it.
know this
That
style.
probably
It's not
means
my
it's really
favorite, but
expensive.
honestly, some pieces
Yeah,
look
there you
really
go.
nice. It's usually when you have in more bigger pieces.
233! 213, I mean.
Yeah. Let's see. I actually forgot what this piece was. See, this piece is actually interesting. Not because of the art itself. Personally, symbolist is not really my favorite style of art. It's distinct, but it's really hit and miss with me. Some of it looks really cool. For example, this piece, I love it because it just shows more of a relaxed atmosphere. And when it comes to usage of colors, it's quite nice and I prefer it. That said, when we get to this, I just don't like how symbolists do facial features. It's not really my thing. They always just have it all over the place. And I can never tell. Oh, yeah, no, those are her legs. They're bunched up. Okay. Well, the first time I saw this, I actually couldn't tell. It's not my favorite, but it's not the worst. It's also something that very much transferred into later Americana style, or specifically Whistler and various artists like that. It's not a direct inspiration, but you can tell that there's a transformation from this to later periods, closer to the early 1900s, mid-1900s, which is a long time ago objectively, but at least in the art sense is very recent. The artist, though, is the reason this is so highly valued. I'm going to pull this back up. Yeah, Paul Gauguin. I'm definitely butchering his name. I do not speak French. I don't even try and do it. Oh, yeah, yes, the French post-impressionist artist. Technically, it's still Impressionist period, but it looks different enough that you can see where it's getting blockier. It almost looks more Cubist. And for anyone who doesn't know what Cubist is, it's probably the best name in art because it literally is exactly what you think it is. Where other ones are like, okay, what does that actually mean? Cubist is, no, it's made of cubes. It's usually shapes and blocks like that. This is the transfer period where I don't really like it as much, but the art here is valued not just because of the artist, but because of the company he kept, and the pieces that this would be sold with would be some of the more famous art impressionist pieces. So you could see this with a bunch of different things, and it was probably sold alongside of Monet at some point, if only because Monet cranked that shit out.
Optical
if you don't know who Monet
photos,
is,
like, is
look,
that
pretty
him?
cool.
Is that the point? Maybe I don't get the art.
I mean, no, but also it's
and why are
subjective.
they all looking in different ways? It makes no sense, bro. Just look.
And
at
that's
the
why
camera,
symbolism is the
dummies.
thing. One looking one way, one looking the other.
Bro,
This
you
is
know how
art
they
telling a
always
story.
say,
I don't
"Oh,
personally
I can draw
care
better than that," and
about
I
the story
always go,
or know
"No,
enough
you
referential
can't in
material
my
to
head,
get
but
it.
I can draw better
But
than
for the
that,
artist,
and
it would make sense.
I'm doing it now. Like, the legs make no sense.
Yeah, and
They
that was
look
probably
like,
intentional.
They look like they're in sleep bags.
Yep.
He looks like a little worm. Or she. Not Joe.
Yeah. But realistically, he's saying it looks bad, and a lot of that was very much an intentional drawn. Like, one person looking one way, one person looking the other. The clothing choices, the stylizations, even the colors. Very bright, very floral. But then just looking one way, looking the other, not actually meeting each other's gaze either, but kind of just off in the distance. This is very much a symbol right here. That said, like many symbols, if you don't get what the reference is, it doesn't make sense. But the people who got it would. Let's go to when we get the price of it again.
Anyway, what price did the car...
Ooh, this one I actually... Okay, I know he hates this one because I saw this video and I love it, but I actually personally like this style. I don't know why, though. I don't like many things from it, but I just kind of like it here. But that previous one, the value there was more of the fourth reason for classic, and I think this one will probably be much in the same way. It was sold alongside pieces that were incredibly famous, incredibly expensive, so the art dealers would by default also be very famous and very expensive to get from. It's the equivalent of saying that this piece back here, let's see, I cannot see, I can Google, yeah, this is the equivalent of saying, it's not so much the artist's name, which it is, which adds value, it's not so much the time period, which is kind of important with all of it. This is right here a piece that was famous and highly valued because it came from a highly valued dealer. Because it had to, considering the time period. Impressionists kind of went in roughly the same circles, so they would be in roughly the same places. It's recent enough, though, that who owns it might not be as much of a factor yet. But at least for this, it would be sold and maintained and stocked in similar places as much more famous people, like I said, Monet. I just want to really harp on this because this is the fourth and final of the traditional valuation practices. it's the reason I'm also not really tearing into this one, because it's one I can at least understand and respect, if kind of think is a little stupid. It's the equivalent of saying, oh, this is from Banana Republic. It must be really good. The brand on here is amazing. It's like the difference between Oreos and knockoff Oreos that are $5 and kind of have a cardboardy taste. It's that. It's literally brand of seller. That's it. That's all it is. That's all that forced valuation is. It's literally branding by seller. But it does matter because it adds value. More in the immediate sense, but given enough time, it then kind of transfers into the third valuation of people who owned it, and they kind of blend together. But they're distinct enough because one is an owner and one is explicitly trying to sell it. That's it.
It looks like a little worm. Or she. Not judging.
We'll
Could make no sense. This guy is showing off his entire hand. It doesn't even look like cards.
It really doesn't.
They haven't put down a single card on the table. It looks like two men just trading Pokemon cards or something.
See, here's the thing. Everything he just said about how it looks like two guys just trading Pokemon cards, it's mundane, it's kind of boring, and it's a thing you would just do. Why is it art? Well, because even though it's not so much a valuation guide, it's because of exactly what he just said. It's art because it's just normal life. Especially around the late 1800s, early 1900s, around the Impressionist era, which I'm pretty sure this is an Impressionist painting. This is a style of just elevating the normal. Where before, in the more high Renaissance style, it was portraits of individual household items. Here, it was more portraits of individual actions, just normal day-to-day life. Things that were ignored by the more fancy people. If you don't have a twirly mustache, this is stuff you would never see. That does lead to the caveat, though, that the people who bought this were the people who were so rich, playing a game of cards was exotic. It's not so bad in the Impressionist sense, and some of the early pieces that were super detailed were more for that crowd, but this is still in that same vein. This is more, it's going to be famous because of two things. One, the artist. Most Impressionistic paintings from this time period have a significantly famous artist because most of them were well known. Minimal circles, minimal selling, but those who did know it were well known, and they made enough that they became quite famous, whether during their life or not usually, actually, except for Monet. God damn, Monet killed it. But this is not so much expensive art because of the art itself. It's, honestly, I like it personally. That's personal taste. But I can see where he's coming from. It's so normal. It's so mundane. It's literally just two guys shooting the breeze with cards. It could very well be, if done now, Pokemon cards, and it would perfectly fit the intent. And that's exactly right. So without realizing it, PewdiePie is right. He completely accurately judged what this is. This is two guys just BSing. That's why neither one's really intense. He's just kind of smoking, but the pipe's barely in his mouth. If it was actually in there, it would fall out at this point. Not really playing too intently. Just kind of relaxed. It's just chilling. That's all it is. As far as valuation goes, again, this would be the fourth aspect of the seller because Impressionist. It would be the first aspect because artist, because again, Impressionists in general are all pretty well known, to some extent more than the others. As for who owned it, I can't really say that one. It's in that time frame where it's close enough to the present that may or may not have an effect. If this was owned by like a queen or someone incredibly famous, that would definitely jack the price up, but I just don't have enough context to say that one. As for any other aspects, yeah, maybe. The art itself is nice, but that's just Impressionists in general, and that usually raises value because people generally kind of like Impressionists even over 100 years later. I mean, keep in mind, when I say over 100 years later, it's a range of time, so it's not exactly hit and miss. It's just, this is when it was the style. Anything contemporary. You can still do Impressionist style paintings now, but it's just not part of that time period. It's just that style of. It's a small distinction, but it's one that does matter.
Shit, or stamps or letters.
Yeah.
I hope it's 4 million, because that's the
The fact that it's only 250 million is kind of impressive. Yep. Impressionist paintings are just general enough that they don't look obscene.
Like, okay. I don't want to be the pretentious guy that says, well, imagine if you gave it all away and but bruh, 250 million. You could save a country.
I know I'm mostly commenting on the art and the value here, but If a country could be saved by 250 million, I was going to make a joke about Monaco, but considering they're a gambling nation and it's very small, that might be small beans for them. Also, considering they're a gambling nation and they're very small, they probably would appreciate the beans because I don't think they actually have agriculture to support themselves, so they probably need to buy it.
You could, you're right.
Yeah.
This sucks. This sucks.
Oh, it's going to get worse.
Identify how much interchange sold for. Okay, so here we have some abstract art, which I think gets more than it deserves. And I think this is a good example of what I was saying earlier, where people are like, I can draw that. No, you can't. Okay, it takes balance. It takes colors. It takes coordination.
I'm going to be completely upfront about this. I'm ambivalent towards this painting. I don't mind the impressionist style, the abstract style. It's not for me, but I don't dislike it. It's just cool. It feels very 70s, 80s to me, which is also because that's when that was a huge thing. It technically came out earlier than that, but it seems to be most commonly accepted as 70s and 80s high culture. Not so much in the 90s. Hell, even later part 80s wouldn't be so much. But definitely in the mid 70s, late 70s, early 70s. You can even, technically it existed earlier than that too, but it was mostly around that period. This is going to be expensive because, well, actually I have a little thing over here. I pulled up. Here we go. Yeah. Manya. The artist is William de Kooning, whose name definitely doesn't sound like something kind of crazy. Yeah, William de Kooning, a Dutch-American abstract impressionist. Rotterdam, United States, 62, married a painter, yeah. And he did abstract expressionism, and modern art. The modern art part, I think everyone can get, and it gets a lot of shit, and sometimes it deserves, sometimes not. Here, though, the important part is you can see the style. This is kind of what expressionism and abstract art especially look like. Interchange and example is really not the most annoying. Excavation, on the other hand, yeah, I don't like this one. I just really don't like this. No. But the reason this is valued is more because of the artist. But because he was a famous artist, there's a very good chance that this was sold in some of the more high-end auction houses, which would then value, by the fourth category of art valuation, how expensive the branding essentially is. And I'm ambivalent towards this one. The price here is based on the artist and who is selling it. Also, and this is one of those weird cases where if it's sold directly from him, it also technically is a branding in the same way the artist is. They kind of blur together. Like most of these valuations kind of blur together. It's kind of like how age will have an effect on all of them because it just has a greater chance to enhance art only. Because if it survives, it becomes more valuable. If it's destroyed, it doesn't exist anymore, so it doesn't count. Which is why it would lose value, because you can't actually have it. Personally, I don't like it.
To find something beauty in the random
but some people like it.
And patterns, okay? But it's still 10
it's
million.
probably, it's not 800.
300. This one is the first one I like, actually. This is beautiful. This one I hope 500.
Nope.
Oh, it's the cheapest one.
Yep. Now, that one I actually know a good bit about. Not the art itself, but that style. This was not so much, it's technically you could count this as impressionist, but I've always viewed it as a impressionist adjacent style. It's not bad. I like it, but they're actually using a highly lined technique here, which you actually see pretty frequently in more cartoon and animation drawings and anime in general now. You see very distinct lines highlighting where your eye needs to go. Where the impressionist style is more about blending together, just showing all the dabs of paint and the raised actual portions of paint from it. The thickness of the paint itself on the canvas is drawing the eye, not so much the shading detail and the hard lines around it. It's a small, little distinct aspect, but it's one that, for any audience of the time period, would definitely reduce it. Now, it's still worth a lot of money. But compared to some of the others, this is a newer piece. It's more of a late impressionist with a lot of alterations. It's not bad. But the reason this is so expensive is probably the artist himself. where the actual art piece, while it still adds value to it, it's different enough from what it would be sold with that it was probably viewed as a lesser item. That said, still really goddamn expensive. But chances are, with that valuation, it probably wasn't owned by someone incredibly relevant to its history. And again, when I say that, what I mean is, if someone famous or historically relevant, usually both, had it, it immediately gains value. This is just a good painting. I cannot speak today. Painting. Ah, yes, I love my paintings. Painting, that's the word. And it's fine, but it's different enough from the style that the places where it would be sold wouldn't be the main line shops. It wouldn't be with the other dealers who, they might have this, but it wouldn't be the go-to piece that they would advertise themselves with. They wouldn't lead off with it. They would have it. They would probably have other things by this artist, but it would be an additional aspect as opposed to main. Let's see if we can get the time.
This one, I hope 500.
87?
No, it's the cheapest.
That's what
one.
it's sold for, though. Also, considering the valuation, that still would probably add a digit now.
What is up with art? It's the rule: the uglier, the more it sells for. This I know the artist is that guy with the R.
I know it's a style. I personally don't get it. But the artist himself is valued.
Rock. What's his name? Is it Roch? Well, this is 86 million.
Orange, red, yellow.
I know it's Rothko. Yes, Rothko.
Yeah. This is a minor style of art, and I personally have actually seen some that are really cool looking. The big hallmark of this is they're incredibly simplistic, but huge. Like the one we saw earlier, the blue, just the blue with a line of blue and then another blotch of blue that was the size of a wall is standard size. If honestly on the bigger end, sometimes. It's basically the art of massiveness. There's a lot of pieces that do that.
Everyone love a Rothko. Oh my god, is that the Rothko? I love it.
This is
it's
art
like
bait,
colors.
but it at least looks
the thing
cool.
Is, like, I like it.
Like,
I'm not here to hate
embracing
the art. I think,
simplicity.
yeah, it's a pretty painting.
Not my thing, but not bad.
But 86 million? I don't...
Yeah. Keep in mind, that's also on the cheaper
It's also kind
end.
of sad. I don't know if this is true of Rothko, but I assume it is. Where, you know, the value always shoots up after the artist passes, because then there's a finite supply of these...
The one exception being Monet. I keep bringing him up because him and Picasso are some of the artists that, oddly enough, killed it financially during their lifetime. I can never remember which one it was. It was Picasso or Monet, but one of them, when they died, their estate was so valuable that the French government stopped the valuation before all of the various paintings were tallied up because it was reaching the point where distributing the wealth in the house would have become a financial burden on the state because it would be a significant portion of France's income, to the point where no individual should technically have that much money. It would be like having $30 million, but in the early 1900s as the value of the estate when they stopped counting. $30 million is a lot now. Almost 100 years ago, that is still a lot of money, but that's the equivalent of being a gazillionaire. You don't even realize how many zeros that is. You have to go look that up. No one knows how many zeros that is. For the one math guy out there who knows how many zeros there is, I'm putting like, oh, Airier, definitely insert this many zeros here. Yes, that's okay. Never mind. You know exactly what I said. But it's that level of I cannot comprehend the worth of this estate. Also, he's dead, so we're going to rip him off, which is the less nice way to say it, but also probably accurate.
Artworks and that's obviously basic economics that makes the price surge up. So a lot of times the artist isn't paid anything, right? It's just exchanging money between rich people.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that I mean, fine. I mean, this is
See what he just said there? So far, I've mostly focused on the 4 mainline publicly acceptable valuations of art. And it gets closer when I say the owner of the art affects value. And what he just said is that exchanging money between super rich people and just doing it through art instead. Yeah, that technically is also historically accurate, but it's going to get really bad soon. There's something coming up I'm going to have a conniption over. And what he basically said is very close to the secondary form of art valuation that I cannot stand.
I kind of get it now. Like, I don't get it. I mean, I was just...
No, you got it. You had it
Yeah.
right.
How much did... so many thoughts. How much did number... Okay. Yeah, this is one of those
Now,
crazy...
This is Jackson Pollock. This is a good example of the art is not the valuation here, although it is absolutely massive. What is important here is specifically the artist's name. Jackson Pollock is one of the most popular, most affluentially successful, and that is not actually me butchering my words. Well, technically it was, but it also is completely accurate. He's effectual, he's affluent, and he was very successful, but affluential in the sense that his work was basically catnip for rich people because it was huge. I'm talking, he would get warehouses, spread out a canvas on it, and then take paint buckets to spread the art everywhere. What you're looking at right here could easily be the size of a garage floor. It could take up a 2-story building. He has done things that large. He's done smaller things too, but it's mostly huge. You know how you see how it kind of goes in and out? That's an individual paint bucket. Each time you see a line of color, that could be an entire bucket of paint. Think about that. This thing isn't so big as to be massive. It's so big that if you sealed it, it would be a garage floor. And honestly, having watched him do it, it looks like the funnest thing in the world, man. He's not an old art. Well, I mean, he's old in the normal sense of he old, but in the sense of this guy is hundreds, if not thousands of years old. He's within the last 100 years. And there are videos and pictures of him in his studio, which is a freaking warehouse, a multi-story warehouse without floors, just huge, doing it. And it's like just throwing paint everywhere. And it looks like the funnest thing ever. Like literally, I would pay to go to a paint like Jackson Pollock class because it would be fun, messy as hell, but fun. He was also very much not an asshole. I mean, by comparison to some artists, at least. It was just really cool to see how he did it. So a lot of this was his personality shown through, so he became really famous. And they were so huge, you had to be rich to have the room to store his stuff. Pollock was just that way. That said, this is one of his cheaper ones.
This looks fucking terrible. This is
I'm going to agree with that
worst.
one.
No, go back. You're not getting away.
I don't actually
You're not
care,
getting away
but
from
at the
me.
same time.
Who's the artist? Maybe it looks better up close.
Jackson Pollock?
Jackson Pollock. Bro, this is bad. You know what they do with artists too?
Let's see if we can go back a second. Let's give a valuation here. Oh, I could just hold that button. Yeah, see, some art he did was smaller, but in general, let's see if we can look at it here. You see where the wall is? This thing is standing up right now. This is an entire wall painting, which means, and I hate having said this, this is small. This is a small Jackson Pollock. You're paying for the actual materials on this one. And a lot of the time, I mean, not nearly as much as they're worth, but it's because you're paying for the name.
You know what they do with artists too? After they die, they take literally every single thing they
Although in Jackson Pollock's case, he was financially successful in his life. It got worse after he died, but he was way successful in his life.
That happened to you, right? You make a little doodle, draw a penis, and you're like, I don't really like that, but whatever. People sell it and like, this is not a representation. This feels like one of that. I'm not saying this guy is a bad artist. All I'm saying is maybe this was not his finest piece of work.
Oh, it wasn't. He has some that are really fun.
Kind of fuck with, you know? This is kind of dope.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, even this I like. It's got red in it. I like red. Yeah, this I like too. This is dope. It's all right. I can see it.
Yeah,
I can definitely see the eye.
It's usually pattern and chaos. This one's more chaos.
Right? Surely he failed sometimes. 200 millions just because it's his name. All right.
Yes, literally that. It's his name.
Like, yeah, you know what?
He's completely accurate here.
17A, I was kind of just experimenting. It kind of looked like shit. But these fools.
I mean, he's making a joke about how, oh, it's just his name. But no, that's right. That's exactly why it's worth that. It's literally just his name. That's it. That's all it is. It's his name. I mean, someone would like it, and it's very subjective. Someone might really well like it, but mostly they want it because they can then say they own a Jackson Pollock. Because he was successful during his life, it was hard to get. Other rich people would value other rich people for having it, so the artist name became very, very important.
How much was Andy Warhol sold for? Sheesh. That's what? The most iconic piece of art I've ever seen is less than all of these? I don't know art. Okay,
so this one, I actually do know the story here. Andy Warhol is reasonably recent, within the last 50 years. And again, I know more about this because I literally worked in the Warhol Museum. So I spent many, oh God, so many hours, literally probably an entire year of my life in actual time and not just days spent reading the bios and listening to the docents and honestly just chatting up the various curators whenever they had a chance. This is not a traditional painting. This is not actually a painting at all. This is a screen print. Andy Warhol, he could paint. He has paintings when he was in his early 20s and as a teenager and sometimes even 9 years old, when he would do traditional painting. And it was actually very nice. He was a very good drawer. He is surprisingly good at the normal style. He just got bored of that and moved on to this stuff. This right here is from his factory phase. And that sounds weird, like the pretentious, oh, he did the factory, he did the blue, he did the enigma phase. Might be accurate to that last one, considering what his preferences were, but that's not important. When I say factory phase for Warhol, I mean he literally had a factory where he was mass producing screen prints of art. He would print out an entire sheet and cut them up because it was an entire sheet of art. He was trying to make mass produced art. Basically, if he had printers now, he would be in love with this. The idea of 3D printing, he would love that because he can basically 3D print a sculpture. That was his thing. His entire thing was mass production of art. He would make something really cool and then he would just beat the hell out of it. This thing is only worth so much because there are many copies of it. There isn't an original because every single one was an original print run. A lot of the others jump in price. But there's one. There's probably a dozen that are just held in the Warhol Museum I worked at. And then there's the ones held by individual artists. There's the extras. And then there's the original copies that he did to press it down on the screen print. For anyone who doesn't know what screen printing is, details on shirts. That's it. That's literally what screen printing is. That's it. You can do this in high school classes to learn how to do it. There's do-it-yourself kits that are honestly not too expensive, but not cheap either. Warhol did that. He learned how to print on silk and fabric and other mediums. That's what made him famous. He was printing out a dozen of these, 100 of these. He printed out as many as he could. This is not so much the cheapest one by comparison. This is the fact that there are multiple first print run copies of this, and it still costs that much. For comparison, he could probably knock this out. Like once the original is set up and he has the colors right and he has the paints on there, he can just knock them out a couple a day, if not more or less, depending on how busy or how much he wants to do it. And there's so many of them. So if he made 10 copies and each one was not nearly worth the same amount as a full painting, but he had 10 of them, he's going to make more money. Warhol was very much about making money, and this was easier to make more money by making more product. And then the fact that Warhol was so much of a self-promoter, he was literally selling himself with every painting. People liked what he did because it was unique, it was distinctive, and they could get it. That last part became very important because even though he was always considered like the underground artist, no, he did not want to be. Warhol was expressively, and I don't just mean expressly, but expressively, he was very much open about the fact he's here for money and for other people to get it. Not the money, but his art specifically. And this is so relatively cheap because there's a supply of it. There is a lot of it around, comparatively. For the others, it might be a $400 million painting, but there's one. For this one, it's about, what do you say was 80 million?
That's
80 million. But there's probably 12 of them, if not more. There could be anywhere from 5 to 10. And then there's all the private copies in the original print run and the sheets that are all connected to. So this might be, if you just looked at the value of the print run, instead of a single square, you could add a 0 to that easily. That's the crazy part about it. Now, Warhol is weird because for him, the art value is really high. Also, his name value is really high. The seller value, technically, it's also the artist value because Warhol sold his own work a lot of the time. Because, I mean, it just was more effective at that point. And finally, the people he sold to. The The people who own Warhol art are famous usually. And I don't just mean, oh, this person was a king in the past. I mean, Queen Elizabeth, the currently alive one, bought stuff from him. Famous artist bought stuff from him. Here, I'll even pull it up right now. Campbell's Soup, the original can, paid Warhol. So every time you go with that basic red Campbell's Soup can, the company paid Warhol because he was actually a professional artist who did designs for companies prior to doing the more artistic stuff. He just started to do more money that way. Coca-Cola bottles, Brillo boxes, that's some of their... let's see. Warhol famous portraits. So as you can see here, I was pointing out that some of the people who are famous would be important. Now, normally Andy Warhol just literally stole pictures from magazines and newspapers and did his own stuff with that. But every now and again, people would commission him. So yeah, Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, that was a thing. Mao, of course, did not do it. And I think these were actually part of a reason he was not well liked in China by the communist government, but I could be mistaken about that. Muhammad Ali, though, and Michael Jackson, pretty sure these were actually commissions from them. So when I mention famous people having art, this is what I'm talking about. People would commission Warhol. So by being famous themselves, they're not just making this a thing, they're making it a very expensive thing because the person who owns it is famous and rich and very well known. And the person who made it is famous and rich and very well known. And it looks, I mean, objectively, it's not my favorite, but it looks distinctive enough that you know who it is. And the fact that he's selling it, so technically it's the fourth one, but it's also falling into him being the artist. It's weird because he was selling it directly. So he technically is the distributor. Technically it falls in the four main categories here. It was the thing. People would just pay him for a portrait, and they were not nearly as expensive as other very famous artists. They were still goddamn expensive, but it was in the tens to hundreds of thousands as opposed to, okay, let's drop a couple million, usually around upper tens, less than 100,000 sometimes. It would vary, and depending on how late into his career it was, the price just goes up, especially when he was kind of done. But if someone paid him enough, he still would do stuff. So you would get some crazy, famous, relevant to history people like freaking Muhammad Ali, man. Normally, when the value is owned by someone and it increases, the value is that painting. In Warhol's case, it kind of functions into the untalked about form of valuation, where famous person has it, other people want it because then they're not missing out by having another one of themselves, which they can get for a reasonably inexpensive amount of price. I say that in the most depressing way possible because it's still goddamn expensive. It's just not millions. It's just hundreds, if not tens of thousands. Still a lot, but doable. And then they go up to 80 million for something in over a decade ago.
What? The most iconic piece of art I've ever seen.
Keep in mind, there's probably 10 of them.
All of these,
if not more.
I don't know art. I take back
again, screen printing. You can mass produce stuff.
What's happening? This is crazy. What price did Wheatfield sign? This is. I don't like it. I hope
don't either. It's impressionist, but it's not my favorite style.
Anytime I don't like it. Anytime I don't.
Honestly,
like
for an impressionist painting, that's really low.
Millions of dollars is painting Black Fire Eye sell for. There's no fire. Paintings. Let me tell you that. So it fails immediately. 84. No, 80. Great. This is beautiful. I like this.
Again, Cubist. Not my thing. Some people like the uniformity and the sheer simplicity of design. How it all kind of fits together. It's very clean. It's very pure. I don't. Personal taste. But this 85. Is definitely one of those...
Nailed it. I like this. 90.
Oh, go back a bit. Remember how I said still lifes? Taking paintings of normal things? This right here. This is what it was. This is probably one of the newer ones. Well, comparatively newer. It's in the probably post-impressionist phase. It's around that impressionist era, though, where it could have been right before or right after, and I honestly don't know, because this style of super close to realistic, but not super realistic, which was probably pre-impressionist, I can speak. Yeah, It's
how
okay.
many more are they? Like, oh, it keeps going. All right, let's move away from art because it's just.
I just want to return to this piece though, because this is a good example of the valuation of art that I don't like. This is not art for the 4 main categories of art valuation. This is art for the bullshit reasons it usually gets made modern art now. It's not the value of the art itself. It's the value of the reasoning the artist provides. It's not the value of the artist's name, although that still helps. It's the value associated by how avant-garde the people holding it believe it is, which is more of an expression of the artist's intent that they write down. A lot of modern art now, like this, is something incredibly simple and easy to make, and then a written out paragraph explaining the deeper meaning that it really reflects the human soul and the suffering that I'm trying to elaborate on, that you would only get if you're so deep like me. In fact, only a few people would be willing to pay the 50 million, 80 million, 500 million they would take to show just how deep you are, which is what you would sell to a BS art collector. Or if you're going to a museum, it's like, see, this is so brilliant. No one understands it. No one likes it. But that's exactly what they said about the Impressionists. No one would ever get it. So why now? You need to get on this when it's cheap. And I'm only going to sell it to you for 1.5 million because you know it's going to be worth hundreds of millions tomorrow. Because if you do this now, it'll be amazing and it's great. And I just... This is an example of a scam. The artist is probably very good, and some people like the simplicity of it. And while this is not the piece itself I'm thinking of, it's the closest one I can get to without pissing off more people, because I know exactly which piece I'm thinking about, and it is from an artist who is still around and I think was probably one of the most pretentious, and aware of it, pretentious, intentionally douchebags. Which, oddly enough, the fact that it was all an act, but as an act he was enjoying, I don't know if it made it better or worse. For clarifying sake, when I worked in the art museum, they had this thing called an international, where every 3 to 4 years they would bring in all the artists and all the avant-garde pieces to show how in touch with the new generation of art that's going to become tomorrow's leaders. Some of it was good. Some of it was being aware that curators were being ripped off because someone just said the right buzzwords to make them go, ooh, this is going to be cool. I can show we're really engaged with the youth. This is very similar to that. The painting itself is simple. But if an artist gave a very wordy description that made it sound that was okay, but it contained enough ego stroking to show how avant-garde and inspirational and inspired and forward-thinking someone is, it would sell to museums and to art collectors, because it's literally dick measuring the art collection game. And then you get into investors who are like, okay, I know this idiot will pay way too much, so if I buy it now, I can sell them back for an entire zero more. And that works. Investment in novelties and entertainment products is not just limited to art. It's also expanded to hobbies and collectibles lately. In the last few years, Magic prices going up, Pokemon prices going up, Yu-Gi-Oh prices skyrocketing. Hell, even the new game Flesh and Blood, which I'm honestly a fan of. The first edition runs are insane because investors like that shit, and they know geeks like me will pay too much. Not bitter about that at all, nor anything. This is an example of essentially a scam. It's telling the people who want to prove they know what's up all the things they want to hear to prove they know what's up, and they don't. Have you ever heard this phrase, a fool and his money are easily parted? This painting, maybe not it, because I think this is one that's probably from an artist who has enough reputation that people actually want his work and other people would buy it so that they don't miss out. FOMO is a lot in art. It's actually a major aspect of every part, driving the 4 main definitions I kind of am okay with. But when it comes to the modern valuation of art, especially when it becomes more and more oblique and more, well, this is my interpretation. A lot of it is literally just scam marketing dressed up to rub the ego of the buyer. That's it. That's all it is. And it's infuriating. I have literally seen a painting made of elephant dung, and it was fresh, and the artist specifically arranged for that dung to be removed from a specific, I guess at this point, family line of elephants in a British museum. Oh, I'm sorry, zoo. Shipped to the Carnegie Museum and reapplied fresh, so it never lost that fresh dung feeling. And if you think that sounds horrible, they didn't realize the first time it was out, they had to seal it. And if you're wondering what that is, it's called Captain Shit in the Golden Stars. Look it up. You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to do it now. And this is not the most infuriating one. Okay, where do we go? Yep. For anyone wondering what I said, the ball's here, 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 and here. It's not my thing. I don't care about the art. Mostly because it's actually sequined. I just don't like sequins in general. And there's something being said here. The one I actually know in particular is this one. This is the one that was in the museum I worked at. There comes a point when you're trying too hard. And this one isn't the worst offender, but it's pretty damn far up there because it's selling it's just selling to the buyer what they know they want to get, but what they don't know enough whether it's good or not. And yes, sure, there's meaning. It's like Captain Shit. He's always being watched by the stars. And it just, I don't even... These balls down here and on the painting, this is elephant dung. This is literal shit. And it has to be replaced. So much of fine art now isn't art. It's just selling to the buyer what they think they want. And that's how good selling works. But it's infuriating when you just look at it and you know it's a scam. Everyone else around it knows a scam. But the person buying is like, oh no, this is high art because it's provocative and it's fascinating and it's so cool, which they never say because they don't know what that word means because it's actually used by people. This is not the worst offender. This one has a pretty cool story, and you can see there's emotion here, and there's like a lot of symbolism, which I personally don't get, but I know it exists. But this is getting really close to it, and the fact that it's literally made using shit and propped up against a wall using literal shit is infuriating. I think I'm going to have to cut this one here. So when I did this, I thought this would be a fun little romp, but then I remembered that the traditional pricing of art is cool and has a great story. And it makes sense if you look at it despite some of the more BS aspects. And then you get that last part, and it's just BS. It's bullshit. Or in that last picture, literal elephant shit. And it's infuriating because the people who buy this are being told how great they are for buying it, but they're being told in a way that they believe. It's so much of a scam. And it does kind of fit in with NFTs. It fits in with a lot of hobby culture. It's subjective, but it's not for people who enjoy it. It's for people who want to be ahead of the curve, but don't really care what they're buying. They just want to be acknowledged like that. It's a fool and their money are easily being replaced and separated. And it's infuriating because you know it's shit. Literal shit. Balls of elephant shit on the floor propping up a canvas that it's okay. It's kind of cool. It's like the comic style and super hyper masculine in a way that doesn't really matter. It's just shit. And that's actually what the meaning of that entire painting was. And I'm hyper simplifying it. So there's a way more to it. And the artist isn't even that bad. They're not doing a bad idea. But the way it was sold and the way it's passed around and the value increases, even independent of the artist, is just scam tactics. It's not even just fear of missing out. It's the fear of not being the best person to have the most forward-thinking ideas, to be remembered as the visionary. And I hate that. And this is infuriating. Yeah. So overall, a lot of the stuff he looked at wasn't that bad. It was classical art. Some I liked, some I didn't. Some were infuriating, but I got it because art is subjective and it doesn't fit my subjective taste, but it makes sense and I can tell why the price is what it is because it fits the classical style of valuation. But if he did price... Sorry, I just need a second to cool down. If PewdiePie does one where he looks at the price of modern art, it's going to be aneurysm inducing. Yeah. So for everyone watching, thanks. This was fun right up until it wasn't when I looked at little elephant shit. But up until that point, I enjoyed doing this. And I might do it again. Just ignore the elephant shit balls because that's an actual thing. But yeah. It's cool getting to use what I've learned just having worked in and around the art industry and then managed to escape so I can actually talk about it. Because again, this is stuff that you don't talk about when you're in the industry because you don't want to upset the right person. Not the wrong person. The wrong person is everyone else. The right person is the person who has the money, who's willing to do stupid shit with it. So you don't want to piss them off because they're willing to throw stupid shit at you if you make the right shit for them. Sometimes literally shit. Literal shit, as we've established. Yeah. I'm going to go cool off more because apparently I really need to. I'm a little more upset than I thought I was. Yeah. All the same, everyone. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.